Okay, well, let's go ahead and get started. Hello, everyone. I'm Sarah Golden, and welcome to our session on the rise of clean aluminum. And I'm joined today by Nick Abbatiello from Dell Technologies. We also have another panelist, Rosa García Piñeiro from Alcoa, which is an aluminum manufacturer. Currently, she's having a little bit of trouble getting onto the platform. So we're going to go ahead and get started within the conversation. I want to invite everybody to also ask questions throughout all of this. The idea of this session is to be serving all of you to understand, where you're at and what questions you have about what it's going to take to procure aluminum. Hello, Rosa.
Hello, can you hear me?
I can, and you're just in time. We were just doing questions.
Sorry about that. I had a little bit of technical problems here. Apologies for that.
No worries. We're glad to have you. So you can see on the right side of your screen, there's a chat and there's also a Q&A. Go ahead and ask questions within Q&A. And really the idea behind this session, if you've been attending any of Electrify so far, is to understand how corporations can help spur forward clean, decarbonized markets through procurements, and through that help electrify and decarbonize our industrial processes. So I'm really delighted to be joined by these two speakers who are making products that contain less carbon and figuring out what it takes to actually procure them. So I want to start out in a way that's a little unorthodox, which is to share a video from Alcoa. Because when it comes to these industrial processes, I think that they can be hard to sort of imagine what we're talking about. And Alcoa has put together some beautiful videos that also help sort of capture what they're working on right now. So.
My name is Ingrid, and I'm a processing coordinator at Alcoa Motion in Norway.
And I'm Jay, an engineering specialist in the continuous improvement COE at Alcoa. We are incredibly proud of our latest decarbonization project. Together with our customer and partner, MMG Aluminum, we're eager to show you our new induction project.
Alcoa is now able to repurpose scrap aluminum to electric induction melting, providing a sustainable way of giving old aluminum new life.
Most plants across the world remelt aluminum scrap in furnaces using natural gas combustion. Motion's induction furnace runs on clean, renewable electricity sourced from wind and hydropower. And by doing so, we save more than 4,400 metric tons of CO2 emissions per year through natural gas displacement. This is approximately the equivalent of 1,000 cars off the road.
It's a green method repurposed in a green fashion, being an essential building block in the green transition. And with this low carbon aluminum, we can make electric cars, bikes, and recyclable cans.
Remaining competitive requires an unyielding focus on safety, operational, and environmental excellence. This project drives Alcoa's transition to a green, sustainable future, provides jobs and opportunities in one of the communities it operates in, and fulfills the market need for low carbon aluminum.
It seems today is the day of the technical problems.
Yeah, it looks like we lost Sarah.
Hello, everyone. I'm back. Sorry if I saw in the chat that there was echoing on my computer on that, so I apologize for all of that. But hopefully you got a look at a little bit of what this looks like for the creation of green aluminum. And if you were able to tell with the sound quality issues, a little bit about Alcoa's goal. And I'd love to turn it over to Rosa, who's the Vice President of Sustainability at Alcoa, to hear a little bit more about what your sustainability goals are and your process around green aluminum.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Sarah. It is a pleasure to be here with you today. And let me start by saying that when we look at sustainability at Alcoa, we look at our business strategy. So we do not have a specific sustainability strategy. We use sustainability as one more lever that supports our corporate strategy. So this is how we look at sustainability and greening the industry as a business strategy. And we approach this from 3 different pillars in the sustainability practice. From one side, we focus on our hosting communities and how we can bring value and share value with the hosting communities. And this is critically important because at the end of the day, our communities own our license to operate. And this means our license to grow our business. So this is a critical pillar of our practice to have a business in the long run and to deliver value to our stakeholders. The second pillar is very much related to what we are talking today. And this is how do we reduce the impact of our operations? So this is carbon emissions, but this is also water consumption. This is biodiversity conservation. This is waste reduction. So focusing on how do we reduce these impacts today has a direct connection to our balance sheet, because by reducing waste to landfill or the open area in our mines, we are reducing the provisions we need in the balance sheet for the future. So sustainability business today is at the core of our business. And finally, we look at our products and we try to enhance the value of these products by providing them with sustainability attributes that our customers value. So low carbon aluminum is one of those attributes that has a value for our customers, because it allows our customers to decarbonize their own products and to serve a better product with a higher value to the society that contributes to the decarbonization. So in a nutshell, this is how we look at it. 3 pillars, always aligned with the business strategy to deliver value to the society.
Yeah, and I like that. My goodness. Okay, am I echoing? Huh. Okay. Well, I like that alignment around differentiating yourself and really providing better materials or desirable materials for off-takers as part of that business strategy. And I'm very happy to hear decarbonized materials are part of that. So Nick, I'd love to hear a little bit about Dell's journey through considering materials as part of your carbon footprint.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Sarah. So if those of you who saw Rebecca Dell's talk yesterday, that was kind of the process we actually followed, right? We first it was about collecting what materials do we use, and where are, like, we had to go through and figure out and quantify, like, what are our top things, right? We know steel, plastic, aluminum, and copper kind of topped out the top 4 materials for us. And then we actually hired some consulting company to help us really go through and look at the hot spots. So really figure out, like, where the most important, or where we should go prioritize. And aluminum kind of jumped right to the top of that list. And so, we didn't know at the time, but aluminum is very energy intensive to produce. And so it's about 20 kg of CO2 per kg of aluminum. And that's really just the initial production of the aluminum, that primary kind of pure aluminum. There's actually additional process steps that occur at the aluminum before we can actually use it. So it has to be alloyed and formed and rolled into sheet or extruded, and that's then in a form that we can actually take it and use it. So we actually went through and benchmarked and collected data from our whole supply chain and tried to figured out what our carbon emissions were, and then attacked the areas that we needed to go were the highest impacts. And so we focused on looking at hydrocarbon produced aluminum, low carbon produced aluminum, and then we started shifting our manufacturing, or shifting our procurement over of aluminum to those suppliers who could provide us with low carbon aluminum.
And Rosa, how are you working with corporations or engaging in corporations like, and I know you're not working specifically with Dell or directly with Dell, but I'd love to hear a little bit about your process of working with corporations and either communicating you have a low carbon product. Is this something that you're hearing more demand for? What's that process like for you? Oh, Rosa, I think you're on mute.
Yes, sorry about that. I was trying to avoid noise while you were discussing. So yeah, so it is a little bit of both things, Sarah. So on one side, we are in continuous contact with our customers because it is fundamental for us to understand what they need to be successful. So what they need to decarbonize their own products. So this is a continuous conversation, and we have specialized people within the marketing team that are in charge of having this conversation. So starting this conversation. So we are screening what our customers are doing, looking for opportunities to bring our capabilities forward. And here is where it starts a discussion. So if we have a customer that has the same interest as we do in decarbonizing the supply chain, we go to them and start discussing, how can we help you? So we have a product line that we have defined that is called Sustaina. And under this product line is where we are hosting all of our different products that are trying to meet different needs from our customers. So one example is Ecoloom, which is the brand that we have put in the market that is built with low carbon aluminum. So fundamentally, it is assuring our customers less than 4 tons of carbon per ton of aluminum produced. So when we know that a customer of ours has an interest on using low carbon metal because this will help them to decarbonize their own product, we go there with this specific product. We also have Ecosource, which is a low carbon alumina. It's actually the lowest in the market. So we can also target customers of alumina that are interested in producing low carbon aluminum themselves, and we go with this product. We also have recycled content product, which is our EcoDura product that helps customers that have an interest on producing with a certain content of recycled content. So we try to be flexible on how we can accommodate the needs of our customers and help them. And this ends up in partnerships. An example that you probably have seen in the media last year was, for instance, with Audi, which is a car manufacturer that had an interest on promoting an electric car with low carbon wheels. So through Ronald, which is the customer of ours, we work on this partnership with the 3 parties to provide hélices containing metal wheels to this customer. So this is just one example, 3 different partners, same final goal, which is produce something that has a lower impact to the society.
Now, when you're creating these partnerships, where's the price point for the aluminum that you're creating that's lower carbon? Does it cost more, and do you hear that being a sticking point for any of these corporations that you're engaging? And going back to the Rebecca Dell video that Nick mentioned at the top, which I encourage everybody to watch if you weren't able to watch it yesterday. One of the things she talks about is how for the end user, it may not be that much more, but for the supplier, it may seem more significant because it's just one component of a final product versus the creator which it is their product. So Rosa, can you tell us a little bit about what the price point difference is for this decarbonized aluminum and whether this becomes a sticking point?
Yeah, I mean, there is a reality in the market, and the reality is that for example, if you take a bauxite mine, you have different ways to mine bauxite. You can get into the area that has bauxite with a bulldozer. You can cut the trees, put bauxite into a car or a truck or whatever, ship it somewhere and refine it, right? This is a way to do it. There is another way to do it, which is you go into this area, you understand who are the different stakeholders, you start engaging with them, and you try to understand what are their aspirations, what do they aim for their community, and you start co-developing how it's going to be the business. What type of benefits would they be interested in having in exchange of allowing you to mine this area? And then you agree with them what you're going to do after mine has finished and how you're going to rehabilitate the land and what uses of the land that would take. And, you know, instead of taking bauxite out of the mine on the second week, it's going to take you 3 years since you get there until you have full permit from the full community following an informed decision to get the bauxite out. So is the cost the same for the company? The answer is clear. The answer is no. You know, the bauxite cannot have the same cost. One is more expensive than the other to be produced. So the reality is that this needs to be understood through the supply chain, and you know, and the final customer needs to put a value on one bauxite and the other bauxite. And bauxite is in every single aluminum that you buy. There is no aluminum that you will buy that was not before at some point in time bauxite, right? So this is just to give you an example. Obviously, the price has to be in the discussion because the cost is different.
Well, Nick, I would like to know more about your onboard commissioning and how you're engaging with suppliers. Can you tell us about some of the challenges you face when you're looking at using cleaner materials?
Yeah, sure. An example for aluminum in particular, you know, we're not in the same, we don't buy directly from Alcoa, so there's several companies in between us, right? And actually what we found was that there was already, that low carbon aluminum were already existing in our supply chain. It's just that we were so far away from the company who was supplying it, nobody was offering it to us. So I would say it's, you know, for those of you who are already using aluminum, you may already know there may already be these companies in your supply chain, and just, you know, the companies in between may not be bringing that to you because they don't know that it's something that you're actually interested in. And I think that's one big thing that, you know, how do we address that, right? The other piece was there is no real industry standard definition for low carbon aluminum. We did a lot of literature searching, and we hired a company, sustainability kind of consulting company, to really go out and do a bunch of literature searches and try to figure this out for us. And they kind of came back and said, hey, there isn't really an industry standard definition. So we had to actually go create our own definition for low carbon aluminum. And we also, because there's no like real third party certification either, we had to actually go really dive in deep to the data, right? The product carbon footprints and the environmental product declarations. You know, in the plastics, if the analogy in the plastics industry is if you look at like bio-based materials, there's actually a third-party certification that will kind of certify the bio content, right? Called ISCC Plus. So like if our suppliers come to us and say, hey, we have ISCC Plus, you know, certification, then we're like, oh, okay, you have a certain level of renewable content, and there's really no need to go do this deep data analysis. But when the aluminum side, there isn't that industry standard, and there's not really a third-party certification. So we had to really spend a lot of time and effort to make sure that what we were getting was right? To make sure that if we were going to go spend additional money to procure low carbon aluminum, that and we wanted to, you know, advocate that we were doing this, we wanted to make sure that the data that we were getting around what the carbon footprint was is accurate.
Yeah, that sounds like a bit of an onerous process too. What does it take to ensure that what product you're actually getting is low carbon? Yeah,
that was good. So we had to engage directly with aluminum suppliers, and we had to, you know, get access to their data, right? So they do LCAs, and I'm sure Alcoa has LCAs and, you know, environmental product declarations. But we did a deep dive like into their LCA, and we also then you know, looked at their environmental product declarations. And in one company, we actually worked with them to collect their primary data, and really had a third party analyze their primary data to make sure that what they were reporting was actually accurate. Because I think that's, you know, that's the thing. If we say we're doing it, we want to make sure we're actually doing it. Traceability in the supply chain was already pretty well established. So once we knew what we were sourcing, chasing it through the rest of the steps in our supply chain wasn't a major obstacle for us.
And can you share quickly, what do you mean by traceability in a supply chain?
So, okay, like Alcoa will sell this to somebody who's alloying it, and they're making a specific grade of aluminum that we would purchase. That might actually end up going to another company who extrudes it into a shape, for example, or rolls it into a sheet, for example. Then it goes to another company which makes the part that we would actually use, or forms a part that we would actually use. So how do we make sure that the aluminum that's going to the alloying company is the aluminum that's ending up all the way in our parts, right? So when we engage in the supply chain, we realize that they were already doing this, right? We found out that there's already low carbon suppliers in our supply chain, and they were already doing this for other companies that were purchasing low carbon aluminum. So we didn't have to really go create anything new. We just had to kind of go leverage what they were already doing from a traceability standpoint.
Rosa, so we just heard Nick talk about how we lack common standards when it comes to determining how clean aluminum is. What's your process for determining how green your materials are, and how do you communicate it?
Yeah, so I agree with Nick, actually, that this has been, this is a point of discussion for every single commodity, for every single industry, right? So what we have done is to join an effort, a common effort in the industry, to align, towards a standard that would have the buy-in from the full community. So in 2011, Aluminium Stewardship Initiative was created, and Aluminium Stewardship Initiative (ASI) is a multi-stakeholder effort. So it brings together civil society, aluminum users like Apple or Audi, to name a brand, so automotive manufacturers, building and construction, Schuko, for instance, or any other electronics, whatever type of, all sorts of users of aluminum, and producers and transformers of aluminum, right? So we all came together in 2011 to work towards a definition of what sustainable aluminum should be. So this is broader than carbon. This is broader than defining what low carbon means. It is to define what sustainable, responsible aluminum is. So it covers the full supply chain, from mining, refining, smelting, any sort of transformation, rolling, extrusion, casting, whatever, and then until the final product. So fundamentally, the aluminum parts that go into a car will be certified to this standard. And to next point, there is also a chain of custody standard that will guarantee that all those steps. So if the smelter is smelting ASI certified aluminum, it needs to be done with ASI certified alumina that needs to come from ASI certified bauxite, right? So the first standard was released in 2018. It has already been updated to a second version, which is more restrictive. And the beauty of it is that it covers not only the environmental components, climate change, biodiversity conservation, water conservation, but also the whole social piece: human rights, indigenous people rights, labor rights, safety in the communities and in the manufacturing sites, and also everything related to anti-corruption measures or transparency in reporting and monitoring. So at Alcoa, we have assumed that this multi-stakeholder process that took us, now 11 years, and in which we have invested a lot of time and effort, it is the right path to go, because it doesn't simplify the discussion to one single element, carbon. It actually covers the full ESG spectrum, which is what we want to assure. And finally, all those certifications are done by third parties with the involvement of the stakeholders that are interested to participate in the audit, which is I think it is quite robust.
I love that perspective. It's one of those things that I'm hearing increasingly more in renewable energy procurements. Also, this idea that it's broadly talked about as beyond the megawatt for renewable energy, but that the goal here isn't just to decarbonize, it's to be creating the world we want to see, and to be making sure we're not creating other unintended consequences as we're shifting to materials that may have less carbon. So I appreciate that holistic perspective when we're talking about aluminum. I'm curious, here we are having these conversations where it feels like we're in these early days of having potential customers asking for lower carbon materials. And I'm curious whether these other more holistic considerations is something that you're hearing demand for from your customers.
My answer is that we are seeing this more and more, and also it is being more and more regulated. So if you look at Germany or Norway, they have already issued regulations on the due diligence, human rights due diligence in the supply chain. And the European Union is regulating, there is a draft position already on the due diligence on human rights and environment in the supply chain for any material imported in Europe. So if you think of that, you know, every single manufacturing extracting company around the world, if they want to have any part of piece of their products getting into the European Union, they will need to prove that they have done this due diligence on human rights and environment. So it's not climate related only, it is much broader. So this is just a wave that is coming, and that in my view, it's going to be, you know, it's going to spill over in other regions of the world, because there's no doubt that human rights or indigenous people rights is on the top of the agenda in many jurisdictions.
I want to go back to the conversation we were having a moment ago around supply chains and traceability, because this seems so huge. We have a question in the Q&A section on the right about, is extraction and or recycled source included in traceability for you all?
Yeah, I mean, both are. So when you think, for instance, of the Aluminum Stewardship Initiative, the ASI standards that I mentioned, traceability applies to both extractives and recycling. So you have to prove that any sort of scrap that you are putting into your product comes from a clean process. So it has to comply also with a number of requirements in terms of transparency, anti-corruption measures, environmental practices, and certainly human rights. So both are equally included. And actually for us, as Alcoa, one of our strengths that we always point to our customers is that we control our supply chain. So we are miners, we are refiners, we are smelting metal. So we are able to de-risk the supply chain for our customers, which I believe will have more and more value going forward as this sort of the regulations are being developed around the world.
Nick, can you tell us a bit more about, can you hear me?
Oh, it's echoey, but I can hear you.
I'm getting like a mute flashing, but if you're able to hear me. I'll ask, how are you engaging suppliers in your supply chain and helping communicate that this is something to you?
Sarah, you're breaking.
I think I got your question though. Oh, she dropped again. She was asking like, how are we communicating this into our supply chain? It's a good question. So we've been working with our direct suppliers to kind of share with them with our activities and goals and what we're trying to drive. And then, you know, what we're finding is a lot of our direct suppliers are very interested and very actually supportive to help us, right? So you mentioned like recycle content and certifications. You know, we started after we started converting to low carbon aluminum, because we realized that we'll always need some primary aluminum, even if we use recycled content, that there's not enough recycled content to meet all the demand for, you know, aluminum. So we thought the best thing for the priority for us was to convert to low carbon as our primary source. And then, you know, we're adding back the recycled content as our second kind of priority. And so we've been working with our suppliers to actually capture all of our in-process scrap and take all that stuff back and try to maintain like the highest level of quality of that material. So, you know, normally aluminum is going to be recycled anyway. It's got value, but oftentimes what we found is that it gets downcycled. So it gets down to a lower quality grade of aluminum, maybe in a die cast part or something. So what we're trying to do is like reuse our own process scrap to keep it at that high level high quality level for as long as possible in its life, right? So, at the end of life, then it gets recycled again, right? It may be downcycled at that point, but we're trying to prevent that from happening right away. But again, a lot of our suppliers have been really, really supportive, and we've actually been able to find some new suppliers even in our supply chain that's really it's differentiated them from our current suppliers.
It's great to hear. Yesterday, I had a conversation with Sarah Neff from Lend Lease about the process of procuring lower carbon materials for buildings. And I asked her the question, did you need to stop working with any suppliers because they just weren't meeting the environmental standards? And she shared that by and large, they've never had to stop working with someone because everyone that they're working with understands that this is a priority and they're trying to work it out. Like no one's figured the whole thing out yet. And I think that's a different perspective than I had, where I assumed there were some suppliers that cared and other suppliers that didn't, instead of just a lot of suppliers trying to make this all work and provide high quality materials so that they continue to have customers. So
I'd say our experience has been largely the same. We haven't really had to have anyone say no, right? Everybody in our supply chain's been very, very supportive.
One question just popped up of how did you engage your suppliers and your suppliers? So I guess this goes back to the question of traceability. But can you answer a little bit about, or speak a little bit about how
Sure.
far in your supply chain do you need to go? What does that look like for you, Nick?
So that was a good question because we didn't know what we didn't know. So we were kind of starting on both ends. Actually, we had some discussions with Alcoa and we had some discussions with other low carbon aluminum suppliers, and we started at the other end where we knew, and we tried to then drill down through the process, right? So it was kind of approaching it from both sides and then figuring out all the different suppliers in our supply chain and then connecting the dots. Like, hey, we found that some of our suppliers were already buying low carbon aluminum for their other customers, but they weren't necessarily telling us about it, right? So as we started asking questions, we started to realize, well, this isn't really as big of a problem, right? We didn't have to go totally change our supply chain at all. We were just able to kind of peel back and figure out who was doing what. And sometimes we never faced a problem with somebody not wanting to tell us. So sometimes people don't want to share their supply chain. But we never found that issue either. Our suppliers were pretty open with whom they're purchasing from, who their strategic suppliers are, and then connecting us actually with the next level back in the supply chain and so on and so forth.
We have a question here, which is a great question for a conference about electrifying. It says, interested to hear more about electrification in the material manufacturing process. And this is an interesting one because when I was putting together this program, I really wanted to include a conversation like this, where we have a supplier and we have an organization looking to procure cleaner materials. And in some way, aluminum is a funny one to include here just because it was always electrified. But at the same time, it can be very carbon intensive, and it's something we need to figure out. So can you tell us a little bit about the process of creating green aluminum, Rosa, and what it takes to decarbonize that?
Yeah, and actually, we unveiled last year, at the end of last year, actually our new vision, which is reinvent the aluminum industry for a sustainable future. And this is very interesting because it entails a number of things. And what you are just saying, electrifying the industry is part of it, because part of our idea of reinventing the aluminum industry for a sustainable future is how can you get to fundamentally, the vision is net zero carbon aluminum, right? And this is through technology and innovation. And this technology is very much electrifying the industry. So if you start, at mine level, there is very little impact, and that can be easily electrified. But the next step, which is the refining business today, fundamentally is based on thermal power and fossil fuels, right? It is about production of heat for the Bayer process. So actually, our refinery of the future concept is based on electrifying this Bayer process. So the first step is the mechanical vapor recompression process, which is a technology that we are developing. And actually, we have the support of the government of Australia to run this pilot in Australia next year, which is already under development. So the idea of this mechanical vapor recompression is to replace fossil fuels in the refining process. And that would allow us, through the use of green electricity, to reduce by up to 70% the greenhouse gas emissions in the production of alumina. Then there is electrical calcination, which is another way to get to virtually very close to zero the alumina production process. Then when you go into the next step, which is the smelting business, as you said, is energy intensive already today for the electrolysis, but the greenhouse gas emissions that come from the direct emissions are through the consumption of anodes. And here we develop ELYSIS, which is fundamentally a technology which is part of a joint venture that we did with Rio Tinto, even if the original process was developed by Alcoa over the last many years. And what this ELYSIS process allows is fundamentally to reduce to virtually zero the direct emissions, because there is no consumption of anode in the electrolysis process. So then the next step is recycling. And we also develop technology for recycling. We have this Astrea project that we also hope to have a pilot test next year, which fundamentally allows to put any type of scrap material, and Nick made a reference to downgrading or downcycling scrap. Fundamentally, Astrea would allow you to put any type of scrap you want into this recycling process and still get out pure aluminum. So as you can see, our technology roadmap to reinvent the aluminum industry for a sustainable future is all about electrification of the process, from the refinery to the smelting process and the recycling piece of it.
Yeah, and I've seen part of that can also be around renewable procurements. And I saw the procurement you recently did or recently inked in Spain. And then if I'm remembering correctly, you also have a plant close to the Columbia River to use hydropower there. Is that right? Is around that procurement strategy?
Yeah, today we already have above 80% of the electricity that goes to our smelters coming from renewable sources. And you're totally right. We are trying to get into power purchase agreements with additional renewable capacity for our smelters, because there's no point in investing a lot of money in technology like ELYSIS or mechanical vapor recompression if then you are not able to get the green electricity to power those processes, right? So you're totally right. This is part of our strategy, and we have a long-term plan to get to, not a long-term plan, actually, a reasonably short-term plan to get up to increase this number to a higher level.
We have a question in the chat from somebody that says that they're tackling the red mud problem during the aluminum production and finding a use for it. And they would like to know how to involve industry in what they're doing, like either Alcoa or Dell. So first of all, what is the red mud problem? And if other organizations are working on similar processes and figuring things out, how do they connect? How do we better get together and put our heads together on something like this?
Yeah, so the red mud, actually, it is bauxite residue. So if you recall what I was describing before about how to mine bauxite, actually bauxite is a surface mining. And what you do is you cut the trees, you get topsoil, and everything that is there, you put in a truck and take it to the crusher, right? So this bauxite product that you're going to take to the crusher has a percentage of aluminum oxide, which is what you're going to extract to make aluminum metal, and the remaining of it is useless, and it is what is called red mud or bauxite residue. So depending on the quality of the bauxite, you have some qualities where you have up to 50 or 50% aluminum in it, and you have other bauxites which have lower quality that might have 25%. So depending on how much aluminum you will have an amount of bauxite residue that you need to deal with. And today, everywhere around the world is put in impoundments. And there are different efforts to find alternative uses for that material that is the leftover after you remove the aluminum from the bauxite. So we as Alcoa, we have been working on this for many years. We are testing different avenues for use in cement, for use in different infrastructure construction, and for separation of the sand from the remaining of the materials. Even we have done testing for using it as a sink for CO2, so fundamentally for carbon sequestration. But nobody has yet, there are different efforts, so in different parts of the world, you have different solutions, but the key here is the volume, because it is very big volumes, and to find a solution that is economic and then that can deal with this big amount of tons that are generated on an annual basis, we need, again, technology development. So the best place to go to establish partnerships that we are super open to in every single process of our industry is to the International Aluminium Institute, IAI. They are based in London. They are a global organization. And within the international aluminium industry, there is a specific working group that is working on for the common good of the industry to collaboratively find solutions for a sustainable and valuable use of what today is a waste that is put in impoundments.
So Nick, there's obviously a lot of things to consider within all of this, and I appreciate the work that Dell has put into this and has prioritized in figuring this out. And it also sounds like there's not an entirely clear path for a new entrance into this market. So what would you recommend for other organizations that like, their company either hasn't put in the resources to do the type of accounting you've done, or just earlier on in this process? Where should they start, and what will it take for them to make up for lost time and really transition quickly?
Well, I'd say, first of all, do an inventory of what you're using, right? What materials are you really, and we're talking about aluminum. So if you're using aluminum, start just asking questions of your supply chain, right? Is Alcoa already a supplier in your supply chain? What would it take to, convert over to their low carbon material? You may find that it's already there in your supply chain, like we did, and that your suppliers just aren't offering it to you because they know you're not interested, right? And then I think also prioritize. Even a big company like ours, we don't have the resources to do everything all at once, right? So you really have to figure out what's your strategy and how do you prioritize, because we use steel, plastics, copper, aluminum, all these other things. Aluminum just by weight wasn't the top 1 or 2, but when you cut the data by carbon emissions, actually aluminum became the top one of our materials. We use a lot more steel by weight than we use aluminum, but the emissions from the aluminum were a lot higher than our emissions from even steel, right? Or plastics for that matter. So that helped us really prioritize, right? Because we knew that because aluminum was a big hitter, and we actually had stuff in our supply chain that was relatively, not to say easy, but not like extremely difficult to implement. We kind of took that and ran with that.
Rosa, as final words, do you have any advice for other corporates that may be looking to be reducing emissions through cleaner materials?
Well, I think Nick put it very, very well. Understand where are your hot spots and focus on that. This is what we have done finding solutions for the direct emissions of our process with ELYSIS, finding solutions for the thermal related emissions from our refineries with mechanical vapor recompression. So this is where we put our efforts, on the development of technology. And partnerships is the other piece. So what you were saying, Nick, is just music to my ears. I wish we had more companies that are really looking to decrease their carbon footprint, because in a carbon constrained world, I mean, we have an advantage. You know, we can sell low carbon metal, and we really want to do it. We just need customers to pick it up, like you did, Nick, and this will be better for the whole society. So we are ready.
Well, thank you both for your time and for being leaders in this realm. I really appreciate you joining me here on the Electrify stage. And thank you everybody who was participating in the chat and Q&As. There's so many great questions here. If you would take a moment to answer the survey that you'll find on the right side of the screen. We're always looking for ways to be making content that's most valuable for the folks that are attending. So please take a moment to fill that out. We do take a look at every single result that we get. And yes, thank you so much for being here today.
Thanks, Sarah.
Thank you.
Thanks for hosting it.
Until next time.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Bye.